welcome back to my One Purpose Magazine digital show. I am here, same setup, lost the table, grab some cards because I'm just going to try out this way because I feel like I rest on the table a lot. So I'm going to try to not do that. I want to be a professional at this and do it in a way that translates. Well, actually, let me be honest. Not that it translates in a way that is, I just want to be able to connect and not make it so serious. My objective in doing this is not to bring news in a kind of a congested, traditional way. I really do oppose how journalists are conformed to this one idea of what an anchor or a reporter is supposed to look like. I believe in articulating your words well. I believe in speaking clearly, but I don't believe in adapting to this way of projecting that a lot of us do in order to be on a news broadcast for a mainstream network. So I just want to kind of engage, like you all have really accepted how YouTube has kind of transitioned your way of getting information. And so I think journalists and people in the media, we have to adjust as well. And I always wanted to do it this way. I never wanted to be an anchor that do all that crazy, I don't even know what it's called. I don't want my personality to change, but I do believe that it's good to articulate. So I have a few topics here today that I am going to go over. You know, I talk about things that impact our community. I try to inform us on the Rust Belt cities and how they are being impacted and where they used to be. So I give a little historical context too, to kind of give us an idea of what we're capable of and what we could be doing, right? So the first topic today is, so let me just back it up a little bit. So we just talking here one-on-one, right? So I'll be open. I know a lot of people don't tell what towns they live in on a public forum, but I live in Crete, Illinois. It is an area south of Chicago, right? And so I learned when I moved there, which it's not the only area that has this history, but I learned when I moved there that it has a history of being an underground railroad. And so I was just like, that is so interesting. And it's so many things that that makes the town really cool, because it has like this rural setting, but it's right off of Chicago. So that's one reason why I really like it. But it wasn't anything new to the people who lived in the area. So I thought this tidbit of knowledge of it being a passageway for the Underground Railroad was very interesting. So in the mid-1840s, a small market center had developed in the community known as Wood's Corner. In 1843, Wood served as the first postmaster and selected the name Crete from the New Testament writings of St. Paul. It came from the Bible. Immigrant Germans arrived in 1840s and 1850s into the 20th century. German could be heard as often as English in Crete. So there it is. You heard German just as much as you heard English back then in the 1800s, mid-1800s. So in the 1850s, nearly 1 million Germans immigrated to America. And in this decade, one of the peak periods of German immigration. And so I kind of like to bring the history. I like to say these things so we can all remember that none of us are native to this land. So anyway, in 1854 alone, 215,000 Germans arrived in this country, due mainly to families associated with the Congregational Church. Crete was a key stopping point on the Underground Railroad, and strong abolitionist sentiment led to a large enlistment for the Civil War. Crete grew alongside the wagon road known as Vincennes or Hubbard's Trail, later the route of Dixie Highway, if you can get a visual if you're from the area, and Illinois Route 1. Among the first landowners was Willard and his wife, who created that Woods Corner that I was talking about earlier, and they arrived in 1836. So among the free states, I'm going to bring it into Illinois. Before the Civil War, Illinois had the longest border with slave states, and it's estimated that about a tenth of the 40,000 to 50,000 slaves who escaped to Canada came through northeast Illinois, most from Missouri, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Some freedom seekers settled in Chicago through Illinois black codes restricted African Americans' right to gather in groups, testify in court, or carry arms. They were also barred from voting and were required to carry certificates to show that they were free. So I thought that was very interesting. And another thing that I thought was interesting, I'm from Dalton, and Dalton is having its issues right now, but I think that it's very important to dig into the historical context of things, because Dalton was also an area that had hundreds of freedom seekers who sought shelter and food when they were on the Underground Railroad on their way to Canada. So I think that as we go through life and as we go through figuring the issues out that we're facing now, that we take into account some of the history that is connected to the areas that we live in. I think a lot of times we don't pay a lot of attention to territory and the history of the territory. So we disrespect the land when we don't realize the effort that was put into creating the environments that we live in today. So I'm big on that. I'm big on paying attention to territory and knowing what the generation prior to dealt with and the generations prior to that. So I just wanted to bring that to the forefront and maybe begin to think about that for yourself, for your own territories, and what it is that the area that you live in and what it was built on, and the type of people who created businesses on the land and created their homes and started their families on the land that you are possibly building on and starting your family on, or growing your family, or whatever it is. Just get to know the history. I think that's very important. So I just brought that to the forefront because that's my history. That is something that I take into account when thinking about things, because I am going to build a business in Crete. And so I just wanted to know more about the community, digging back further than my knowledge and when I was living there. So anyway, I think that's something that we need to do. Moving on. So talking about building a business. I have mentioned previously in previous episodes, we talk about black media and supporting black media. You all may notice and may remember this, but when Obama had his last interview, it was probably the last interview that he did. I don't know if he had a book coming out. Oh no, I'm sorry, it wasn't a book coming out. It was him talking about the opening or the groundbreaking for the presidential center that will be on the south side of Chicago. So when he did the interview talking about that, I believe maybe it was with ABC, it was with one of the mainstream media outlets, he mentioned the importance of media and the influence of media in the work that we have to do going forward. So I was very happy that he had brought that up, because I think media is very essential to our democracy. With that being said, I think that with what we all have experienced, especially in the last decade, with a lot of the racial issues and some of the incidents of racial unrest leading all the way to the George Floyd murder, I believe that it is time that black media is upheld in a way that mainstream media is. I think that our voices and our stories and our deliverance of the news is equally important as any other news outlet that is out there. And I say this because they tell stories, and their stories may come with truth. They may come with evidence that it did happen. They have cameras there, they have seen things, but as we know, that even when things are on camera, our judicial system investigates, right? So our law enforcement, everything has to be investigated, right or wrong, even though we're seeing it with our own eyes. And I think that to a degree, media needs to be held to that same account. When we see things on television that is reported, we don't get the whole story. And I think that that is very important for Black people to do when we tell the stories, because we know the why most of the time. We know why things are happening in these communities. We're not going to just report what. We know why there are burglaries and robberies happening in Black communities. And we know why a lot of these murders and violence is happening in a lot of urban communities. And it has a lot to do with disinvestment. It has a lot to do with lack of funding in these communities, and so many other areas. So we are not going to just tell the what. We'll deliver the why as well for the most part. We have so many experts now that's in areas of public health, that's in the areas of law enforcement, that is connected, very well connected to knowing the legislature and what's going on with the laws that are written on a local level. And so we have people that we can connect with that can help us tell these stories. And so I think that it's very important, and straight away from my card, I think that it's very important to begin to support a lot of these publications, digital TV shows, including my own, that want to talk about the things that matter for us, and that is by us. And I say by us because there are a lot of organizations that target Black people specifically, but are not owned by Black people. So they have Black faces on the screen. You'll see Black people that kind of do the work, but they have to follow the formula of the owner. If we own it, we create the formula. We tell the stories from an unbiased perspective for our community. Now, of course, we live in America, and everyone has a right to get news how they want to get news, and I think it's a great thing. I believe in diversity. Don't allow my point of view to make you think that I do not believe in diversity, but my focus and my purpose has everything to do with building up my people. So with that being said, that's that. It is what it is. So let's see. I wanted to share the story. No, I wanted to share the website, blackownedmedia.org/the list. So it gives a good list. It gives a kind of fully fledged out list of Black owned media, from publications to, I believe, TV shows or digital shows, which is a big thing now. I love it. I love it. So moving on to the next topic. And Roland Martin Unfiltered. I wanted to call him out specifically because he is really trailblazing this for how digital TV, digital shows, digital news shows, the blueprint. He's given a great blueprint on how we can take this YouTube platform, or we can take a streaming platform and create our own content in a professional way and do it to where it looks like it is done by the mainstream folks. So I give him much credit for that. There was a story that came out recently, and I'm smiling because I'm kind of like a little prophet. I'll say I'm somewhat of a little prophet. So as you all know, if you follow me, I have been saying and really made a major component of my foundation to focus on building studios in the Rust Belt cities, some of the areas that were highly impacted by the loss of manufacturing and factories in these areas, right? And so there was a story that came out that a young man, if I can find it, I done got my cards all mixed up. Oh, here we go. That a young man, so here's the story. Let me just go back. According to Associated Press, construction is underway for what owners say is the first Black-owned television and movie studio in Michigan. Stand-up comedian, go brother, and director turned entrepreneur Amaru, who only goes by one name, said it was a combination of events with the death of George Floyd and the COVID-19 pandemic that inspired him to open Greenwood District Studios. So I just recommend that if you by any chance are online and you want to look up something, check out this new construction that is underway, Greenwood District Studios. I think that it is the way to go for a lot of the open warehouses that are in these urban cities that a lot of people have left for reasons that are understandable, violence, lack of jobs. So I totally get it, but it is an opportunity for those of us who can stick it out to build things that our communities can use and can profit from, and utilize the land to create opportunities for our people. And I think that it just makes me smile, it makes me glad, it gives me hope, a lot of hope, that things will move forward and we can create a path for our children in the future, which is just a wonderful thing. And so my last topic is one that comes with great controversy. So creating me a new heart. So it's a memoir, kind of. It's a memoir journal. So it is a tool actually to help people self-evaluate. And it is something, like I said, I've been working on since 2014, and a lot has happened in my life since 2014. And so I just added a lot of that into my memoir, which I think completed it. My last 7 years was the completion that I needed. 2014, 14, 7 years, 20, 21. 7 times 3 is 21. 7 years is what it took to complete. Look at God. 7 is the number of completion. I just put that 2 and 2 together. I just put that together on camera. Like, I had not acknowledged that before prior to this moment. Look at God. Anyway, that's amazing. Are vaccines safe for kids? Listen, I'm going to say this to my people. You have to do what your gut instinct tells you to do. For me personally, I'm okay with vaccines. I'm okay with the mandates. I get it from a public health perspective because I work in public health. So I get it I weigh the logic. And I listen to people who are not for it and are totally against it. And I hear them. I don't agree with them, but I hear them. I hear the logic from the professionals who do this. And it causes me to lean more in what the scientists and the researchers and history has said. And American history is totally different from overall history when it comes to vaccines. Maybe we'll talk about that one day. But for right now, so earlier on, NIH, they, who we all know of NIH at this point, NIH, CDC, FDA, these are organizations that we never talked about regularly, but it seems as though they are at the tip of our tongues. So I want to just read through this really quickly. NIH research on coronaviruses helped scientists quickly identify vaccines to test for SARS-CoV-2. Long before COVID-19 became a global crisis, scientists at NIH's Vaccine Research Center were examining the fundamental mechanics of coronaviruses. Already the world had witnessed the damage of SARS and MERS, the damage SARS and MERS could do. And veteran virologists knew it was only a matter of time before the next threat emerged. Investigators had devised a strategy. However, their proactive research provided a much-needed jumpstart in the race for a vaccine. Recounting those efforts, Dr. Kismakia Corbett, a senior research fellow who spent the past 6 years working with VRC, Vaccine Research Center, strategist in NIH's Viral Pathogenesis Laboratory, and who's become a central figure in COVID vaccine science. Black woman. Recently discussed in this with NIH. She did a conversation that's published on their website. She discussed SARS-CoV-2 mRNA vaccine development and how it enabled by prototype pathogen preparedness. Really don't know about all that. So she went into detail in talking about those things, and so it was broken down with children. So they did their research. They did their research on adults first, and they did their studies on adults first, and it was broken down into 4 phases. The first phase was 20 to 100 healthy volunteers, and the researchers looked for these specific things in the volunteers. 1, is the vaccine safe? 2, are there any serious side effects? And 3, is the vaccine causing an immune response? In phase 2, they had several hundred volunteers, and they wanted to know, and they looked for what are the most common short-term side effects, what's the body's immune response, and are there signs that the vaccine protects against infection. By phase 3, they had 1,000+ volunteers, and they looked for how do disease rates compare between people who get the vaccine and those who do not. How well can the vaccine protect people from disease? And is it safe and effective? And only the FDA can approve that. And its benefits, is it safe and effective? And if its benefits outweigh the risk. By phase 4, the treatment is approved by the FDA and made available to the general public. That's phase 4. FDA closely monitors the safety of the vaccine after the public begins using it. Researchers continue to collect data on the vaccine's long-term benefits and side effects. And I think that was a lot of people's initial rejection of the vaccine, because they didn't want to be tested. Now, I'll say this, and this is in all truth and transparency. I was definitely okay with them testing this vaccine out on our people. And I say that because there have been times in history where vaccines have been tested on the people in Africa, and once perfected, brought over to America so that we can use it willingly and freely. And so I think that testing it on our people is the least this country can do in fairness to the ones who were abused previously, so that we can be healthier in this country. So I think a lot of times, I was going to say this, I think a lot of times we fight the wrong battles, but I'm going to close that out. I'm going to use that as my closing point. But for right now, the vaccines arrived in December 2020. As we know, the FDA granted emergency authorization for 2 COVID-19 vaccines based on safety and efficacy data from clinical trials. The vaccine trials for children are a little bit different than, and this is the point of the segment, but the vaccine trials for children have 3 overlapping phases with staggering start dates. Testing starts with children from early elementary age to 11 years old, then from around 2 to 6 years old, and finally from 6 months to 2 years old. For each group, the first step is to run a study to find the best dose. With children's vaccines, trials are much smaller than the original trials in adults. Instead of having 30,000 to 45,000 people, half who get the vaccine and half the placebo, they were enrolling more like a few thousand in each of these age groups. So the total enrollment numbers for the 2 children's vaccine trials were expected to range, or did range, from 8,000 to 13,000 participants. The children's trials have fewer participants because they have different goals. Researchers check the children's immune response and how it compares with antibody levels and immune activity that protect adults or teens. The researchers also track side effects to make sure they are no worse than what adolescent or adult participants have reported. So, I know that is a complicated conversation, but I do think that we have to start just talking about the development and how it works, and just putting more information out there instead of telling people it's something that they have to do. Give them the information, let them ponder on it, let them think about it, let them kind of play around with the facts in their head a little bit, use a little bit of logic, and whatever happens, happens. I know that, I don't know why the media was kind of pushing this so hard when it comes to it being mandatory and making it a divisive conversation for people. It's not divisive. It's not anything we need to fight over. It's something that we need to kind of engage in conversation with to understand where the hesitancy comes from. But anyway, I had mentioned a little bit about divisiveness, and I mentioned, how we get combative about things. And this is just my closing statement. And I know I may go over 18 minutes for this one, but it's been a while. I haven't seen you all in a few months. But I want to challenge people to check their mental health. Even if you feel like you are okay, I'm really urging people to check their mental health. And I say this because how you show up in the world really matters. And I've noticed that there are people who are on social media and they want to engage in a combative conversation with people that they do not know. I don't know why. I don't understand the root cause of this desire to do this. If there's a void that needs to be filled, if they just lack, maybe if they just lack some type of camaraderie or friendships in real life, I don't get it. I don't know what it is. But I just encourage us to check our mental health in a way that I encourage it, because I'm not an expert, is to journal. So I think that journaling is probably the prelude to therapy. And I think that it is important for us to kind of jot down our thoughts, the feelings that come along with those thoughts, kind of play back our day, play back things that stick out in your head, in your thoughts, and the thing that keep coming up and you keep thinking about it. Write it out, analyze it that way, and read over it. And then ask yourself, how is this making me feel? And why does it keep coming up? I think that's important. I think that therapy is very important. I'm no expert. I'm not degreed in psychology or anything like that. But I promote self-love. I wrote a book my first book that I wrote came from journaling. So I just encourage you all to just check on you, because a lot of it is not necessary. We don't have to be in the comment section fighting. It's enough going out in these streets that we can fight against and that we can war against. And showing up in someone's comments to debate or argue with them about a choice that they made in life is not helpful to the society that we live in. If you want to go out and fight something, hit the streets.